This is a test slide to see if the audio is working. Welcome to the October Tea and Talk. My name is Susan Smith, and I am the archivist at Minnetrista and the Delaware County historian. Today's presentation will be about crimes in the small town of Eaton, located in northern Delaware County. I became interested in this topic while cataloging the Herbert Hamilton collection. Herbert, and his parents before him, were longtime residents of Eaton, and I myself have lived in the town for over 20 years. I also knew the people who bought the Hamilton home when Herb sold it and had the chance to tour all through the house. So the stories about his parents and happenings in the town are of a personal interest to me, and hopefully you will find them interesting too. Before we start, there are a couple of terms to point out. These were used in the newspapers in the early 1900s. A yegg is a burglar or a thief, a yeggman. Yeggmen were multiple thieves. Clues was spelled C-L-E-W-S, and banditry was the act of crime. An interesting item in the Heritage Collection at Minnetrista is a set of brass knuckles owned by Joel Hamilton, Herbert's father. The story of why he had these is not clear, although Herb related that a bank in which Joel had worked had been robbed, and afterwards he acquired these knuckles to discourage further attempts. This is a present-day photo of the building in which the Eaton Post Office used to be located. It sits on the northeast corner of Center and Harris Streets. This postcard depicts the same building in the early 1900s. Here we see the interior of the Eaton Post Office in that building. On the left is Joel Hamilton, Herbert's father. In the middle is Cora Wilgus Hamilton, Herbert's mother, and to the right, by the door, is an unidentified woman. Joel Hamilton was appointed Eaton postmaster on August 10, 1900, and this was renewed January 31, 1901. On April 18 of 1902, burglars entered the post office and stole $2,000 in stamps and cash and some jewelry belonging to the Hamilton family. The incident was not discovered until the office was opened at 7 a.m. A blacksmith shop in town had also been burglarized, and the tools stolen from that business were used to gain entry to the post office and the safe inside. The robbers then left Eaton, stole a horse and buggy from the pumping station in Albany, and fled toward Ohio. The horse and buggy were found abandoned about 3 miles west of Red Key. In December of 1902, the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette reported that federal authorities had ruled that Joel Hamilton would be responsible for covering the $2,000 stolen from the post office. It had been discovered that he had not placed the stamps in an inner box of the safe as per regulations, and therefore the burglars had easier access to them. On November 23, 1909, the post office was robbed again. This time, the thieves stole $1,200 to $1,500 in stamps and cash. The postmaster, Samuel D. Morris, entered the building at 6:20 a.m. to find the outer doors to the safe standing ajar. A window lock had been slipped with a chisel, which the thief had left lying on a table. The safe had not been blown, but instead had been opened using the combination which led authorities to believe that it was the work of an expert safe cracker. The investigation turned up a possible lead when a restaurant owner in Eaton told authorities that a man dressed like a hobo inquired about the night watchman, but was told there was only one on duty during the day. It was thought that the hobo was casing the town in preparation for the robbery, as he did not seek out the watchman, and his appearance and manner seemed to indicate that it was not his normal persona. News articles do not indicate whether the thief was ever caught or the stamps or money recovered. The post offices in Roll and Upland were also robbed in 1909. Dynamite was used at both of those locations, and authorities had jailed the Bauman brothers for the Upland robbery. Next, we'll look at 2 bank robberies in Eaton. This is a current photo of the 2 banks I am going to speak about, and they are located on the corners of Harris and Hartford Streets. This is a current photo of the Eaton Farmers State Bank building located on the southwest corner of Harris and Hartford Streets. Up until about 10 years ago, It housed the Eaton Video and Tanning business, and prior to that, the Eaton Veterinary Clinic was located in the back part of the building where the door is located on the left side. The building is currently empty. The bank was located in the front corner portion that has the peeling purplish colored paint. On Friday, March 28, 1924, the Eaton Farmers State Bank was robbed. The yeggs blew the safe and made off with approximately $4,000 to $4,500. When this bank was robbed, not only was the vault blown, but the telephone and the telegraph wires were also cut. The night telephone operator, Helen Duke, saw the perpetrators but could not describe them. The telegraph office was completely ransacked when they cut the lines. This also cut the town off from communicating with the rest of the world. Mrs. Martha Lineback, the night telephone operator, was awakened by the first blast of dynamite in the bank. The phone exchange was located on the floor above the Eaton State Bank, across the street from the Farmers State Bank. She noticed that the outside street light had been extinguished and was afraid that if she put on a light, the yeggs would see her. She said she heard a total of 3 explosions, but authorities thought there was probably only 1. She also thought that there were only 2 men who took breaks between setting the charges. Her house was the first residence south of the bank where her family was sleeping at the time. An older son was in Albany and had expected to return to Eaton during the night, and she was afraid he would arrive and run into the thieves. When the yeggs left, she tried to summon help, and that's when she discovered that the lines had been cut. Later, by a private separate line from the telephone exchange to the power company, she was able to get through to Hartford City, where a message was then relayed to the Muncie Police Department and Sheriff Hoffman. This was around 4:50 a.m., and after bank officials were notified, the word spread out from there. It was discovered that entrance was gained by prying open one of the front windows. A hole was broken through the brick wall of the vault, the combination lock was hammered off, and into the knob hole, nitroglycerin was placed by means of a syringe, which the yeggs left in the vault with the nitro still in it. After the first shot, the interior door of the safe was blown off, allowing access to the money. No safety deposit boxes were tampered with, and no other bank records were stolen. There was, however, a large mess to clean up. A tin cup containing more nitroglycerin, absorbent cotton, and fuses were found. They had also cut the phone lines to the instruments inside the bank. The manner in which the phone lines were cut indicated that it had been the work of amateurs. A hacksaw, found sitting outside on top of the pole, had one blade broken, indicating that they had had some difficulty in cutting the lines, and another small saw was also found. None of these tools used had previously been on site, nor were they stolen from the nearby rail yard. The Bodge family saw the thieves using flashlights in the bank and expected to see them leave and find out what was going on, but the criminals went in a different direction to where they presumably had a car waiting. Since the criminals had been using lights, they had drawn the blinds in the bank so no one could see what they were up to, but light was visible around the edges of the blinds. Because there had been no night watchman in Eaton for 2 years, the Webster Detective Agency from Indianapolis took charge of the investigation. Interestingly, this agency was responsible for the arrest and conviction of 33 bank robbers in Indiana during this time period. A March 30th Star Press article indicated that the wall was probably blown open and not picked or chiseled as previously thought, and that would account for the 3 blasts heard by Mrs. Lineback. Bits of plaster, brick, etc. were found embedded in the record books, indicating that a powerful force had created the hole. The only clues were some fingerprints found on tools used to dig a hole in the vault wall where the explosives were placed. It was believed that the robbers were familiar with the town because of the knowledge of where and what to damage, and that they were not from the area and probably escaped by car because they made a clean getaway. It was thought that this might be the same group that in November of 1923 cut the telephone wires in a similar manner, but were evidently frightened away before doing anything else. It was advertised that the bank would not reopen until state officials had examined the books to determine the exact amount taken. On Saturday, the Eaton State Bank helped the customers of the Farmers State Bank because they were scheduled to reopen on Monday, and the phone and telegraph services were restored. The bank was insured, so customers did not have to worry about their deposits. The crime had attracted a lot of attention, mostly through the newspaper articles, and a group from Muncie went to see the sights after hearing about the robbery. Supposedly, that group attracted the attention of the locals, who then followed the Muncie folks around to see what they were actually looking at. A February 19th article described the Lawrence Hurd trial. He was charged with robbing the Citizens Bank at Charlottesville, Indiana. During the trial, it was said that he was purported to have made incriminating statements about the Eaton Bank robbery. He denied this, though, saying that the story had been told to him by the prosecuting attorney, Waldo Ging, and not the other way around. I did not find any further information about his supposed connection with the Eaton Bank robbery, but he was convicted for the bank robbery at Charlottesville. On Tuesday, May 5th, 1925, the Eaton State Bank was robbed at 2 a.m. This is a current photo of the Eaton State Bank building located on the southeast corner of Harris and Hartford Streets. It's currently owned by a heating and cooling company. Here we see work being done on the lines outside of the Eaton State Bank after the robbery. This time, the Yeggs stole $2,300 in cash and securities. It was thought that there were 6 or 7 of them, all unmasked. They blew the vault with 7 nitroglycerin charges, shot out streetlights, cut the telephone wires, which again kept the town cut off from authorities, and they kept citizens at bay. 2 of them forced the front door open while the rest stood guard. Here we see the vault with its door blown off, indicated by the yellow arrow, and the effect that the blast had on the interior of the bank. Not only did they blow records as well as cash and coin to bits, but also the blast shattered all of the windows in the building. Only a radio set in a back room and a second vault containing securities were undamaged. Evidently, they once again knew where the cash was located. Also, an oblong glass fishbowl, indicated by the red arrow, was shattered, and sadly only 3 of the 17 fish survived. Only a year after the Farmers State Bank had been robbed, the town still had no night watchman or constable on duty. The explosions woke the town, and the nearby neighbors, who were trying to figure out what had happened, were shushed by the criminals when they fired off warnings with a shotgun. John E. Stiles, a baker, was on his way to work when he was fired upon and was forced to seek shelter. Mrs. Jack Osborne, the wife of Stiles' partner, had gone out on her porch but had to run for cover when the thieves shot and hit a windowsill close to where she was standing. Lewis Henderson, a restaurant owner across the street from the bank, had a gun and tried to take aim at one of the Yeggs from his window, but the corner streetlight was still on, and the reflection from the barrel of his gun was seen by a Yegg. The criminal told him to keep his head inside unless he wanted it knocked off. Stories of their escape were conflicting. They ran about half a block east, down an alley, and hopped into their car. Or they ran east to divert attention from their car that was parked on the west side of town. Or some people heard the car going west towards Studebaker Pike. The Yeggs had .45 caliber pistols, and officials thought that the crime had been pulled off in a Wild West style. On May 6th, the Muncie Evening Press reported that Muncie officials thought the bank robbery had involved locals with knowledge of the layout of the interior, and that the front door lock had been tampered with in a manner that would have made it very easy to open the door. Also, the other vault in the bank was not disturbed. The money had been secured in the safe that was in the front of the bank, and this was known only to a few people. That money had been placed in that safe the evening before, and the curtains had been drawn while this took place. That aspect rather indicates that someone probably had inside knowledge of the robbery that was going to take place. Differing stories of their escape also led authorities to believe the local angle. The authorities believed that spotters had been used to map out the scene, and this was a regular technique that had been used in bank robberies at the time. This news clipping indicates the surprise of the police that the Yeggs only robbed the one bank and not the other one across the street, even though it had been robbed the year before. Eaton experienced a whole series of crimes in the 1920s. On May 8th, two garages, the Garrett Garage and the Eaton Trucking Company, were robbed, and an attempt was made at the Standard Oil filling station. The criminals made their getaway in a high-powered automobile. At the Garrett Garage, they came in the rear door and rifled every showcase and stole practically everything in the building. This included 36 tire tubes, 100 spark plugs, 7 tire casings, motor timing devices, and many other minor accessories. At the Eaton Trucking Company, they smashed the lock on the front door and drained the gas tanks of 3 large trucks that were parked inside the building. At Standard Oil, they tried to steal more gasoline, but were evidently frightened away. For a while, it was thought that this was the same gang who had robbed the Eaton State Bank a few days earlier. On May 11th, the Muncie Evening Press reported that one man had been arrested, Elmer Fontaine of Matthews. He confessed, and then authorities arrested Francis Ritchie, Orville Susie Sunday, Bernice Gamble, Grace Gamble, and Crystal Ritchie. Crystal Ritchie was arrested as a material witness with supposed knowledge of what had happened. Fontaine's confession led to the recovery of part of the loot, which was found in a barn 1.5 miles east of Fairview, Indiana. Some of the stolen tires were thought to have been thrown in the river. Again, there was speculation that the thieves who had robbed the garages were also involved with the bank robbery. On May 13th, the Muncie Evening Press reported more thefts in Eaton. This time, the thieves stole 1 ham, 3 pounds of bacon from a smokehouse, 2 joints and a side of meat, and either 28 chickens or a flock of 35 Plymouth Rock hens. Francis Ritchie and Orville Sunday did confess to taking part in the Eaton garage robberies. As part of their confessions, Ritchie and Sunday evidently led authorities to believe that at least some of the loot had been thrown into the river. On May 27th, the Muncie Evening Press reported about 2 other bank robberies that were very similar to the one in Eaton on May 5th. As printed here, it was the belief of local officers and state authorities that all the robberies had been carried out by the same gang. This news clipping shows a list of all the bank robberies that had taken place in the state of Indiana in 1925 by July 14th of that year. I hope you've enjoyed this look at crime in small-town Eaton. If you have any questions or would have any information to share with us, please contact me either at the email address listed or at the phone number. Please know that we are still working on a limited basis in the offices, so it might take a while if you leave a voicemail message for me to get back to you, but I will, and I look forward to talking with you if you have any questions. Thank you very much.